All right.
You should be used to a lot of these anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So how's it going, everybody? This is Omar Thabit, and I am live with Sonya Thomas, former colleague of mine. Sonya Waters Thomas. Yes, exactly. Yeah. How are you, Sonya? How you been?
I'm great. How are you, Omar?
I'm doing well.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, for sure. You already know we got to have you in the building, and I love that you're rocking the Cosmos shirt representing. For those of you that don't know, Sonya is the behavior academic interventionist at Hamtramck High School. Any other title next to your name? Because I know you do a lot.
No, but I'm in the building though.
Yeah, there you go. So Sonya is here today. Like I said, she's here to talk about a few things and does a lot. And her family. We were just discussing some things that her kids are going through right now. So I'm gonna let you get to talking though. So first and foremost, can you tell us about yourself, Sonya?
Just like you mentioned that I think I'm entering my 5th year at Hamtramck High School as an academic and behavior specialist or interventionist. On the day-to-day, I see the differences and the changes in the kids. So from one day to the next, I can see and do something different, right? But as far as myself, of course, yes, I'm married. I have 3 children. I have my daughter. She's a junior at Clemson University on a volleyball scholarship. Xavier Thomas, he's a sophomore at Brother Rice playing basketball. And then I have Tyler, I always call him my last born. He's transitioning to the 7th grade. I guess my educational background, I've been in education for a very, very long time with a break in between, maybe like in the workforce development, for probably like 7 years. So I have a background in secondary admin, athletic directing, and clinical mental health counseling. So all those things. So education is very important to me.
Definitely. And if just off this conversation, and I'm hoping that people will get that off of you, that you are very, very intrigued and into the education field. Yeah. So my next question to you is, a lot of parents that I have spoken to, and I know you probably would agree with this, is that they believe that it takes a village to raise a child, okay? Do you believe that's the case, and then why do you believe that's the case?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think what's important is that people understand what that mantra actually means. It's just overall the interaction that the child and adults have with one another in a specific or localized community. And for example, if my mom put out some rules and my neighbors may know that I'm supposed to be in the house at 8 o'clock, my mother don't need to be home to tell me that I need to be in the house at 8 o'clock. Because if I'm out the house at 8:05 and my neighbors see me, my neighbor's going to tell me, listen, it's past 8 o'clock, you need to be in the house as well. We're talking about respect, right? But it's not with the intent of having the village raise your child. It's just a mere the importance of interaction and building that relationship and respect amongst the adults and the children.
Definitely. And I agree with that too. I know you mentioned about your daughter playing volleyball at Clemson. So what is her experience playing volleyball at a state where she may have never been to before going to school there?
The experience, she loves the weather, number one. And I think like when you have a child who's being recruited, there's a large number of things that you need to look at, but more so about how can you see yourself in a particular environment or on this school campus. And typically, most students will know once they step foot on there, and have conversations with the staff and others around on campus. They pretty much know that this is the place for them. As far as Solei, she likes it. The transition is getting the real life experiences when you're actually playing. Like, for example, transition from like an AU, of course, for her, it was more the volleyball itself was more challenging at the AU level. She played. She started out with Club Extreme, and then transitioned on to Legacy. So of course, when you're playing on the stage like a Legacy Volleyball Club, which typically toggles between number 1 and number 10 in the country, always, the spotlight is always on you, and you're not accustomed to losing, right? But I always tell, my kids, like, you're going into a program who has not won a lot of games, but you can't be that difference maker. So her experience right now is pretty good. She had a phenomenal freshman year. I mean, she did pretty good her sophomore year as well. So I won't take up too much time with her accolades, but she loves it.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's definitely why we're here. It's all the time you need. But my question to you now is, you said that it was more of a competition for her with AAU ball than it is college ball. Is that what you said? More competitive?
Yeah, well, more competitive.
Yeah.
Like from the high school level, typically she graduated from Renaissance. So typically in the city championship, it will always either be Cass or Renaissance. It was like, who's going to win it this year, right? And then once you get into the districts, it becomes more competitive. But something that is equivalent to playing at the collegiate level, it is unmatched. I mean, you just can't determine or set up a setting where it's going to be equivalent to playing at the collegiate level. You just can't do it. So getting acclimated to the collegiate way is going to take some changes and some adjustments. So you always say you're going to always have somebody tell you what to do, when to do it. You get bossed around, so you need to get used to that, right? And lend yourself some flexibility to make mistakes. But what do you do with your mistakes? You learn from them and move forward.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And so my question is, this is kind of not something I've written down, but what is her goals after? Like, is there something that she can look forward to dealing with volleyball after she graduates out of college, or is it just something? I mean, I know that there's U.S. Olympic.
Well, you're using it as a vehicle, of course, to obtain an education.
Yeah.
So we're doing that, but life after volleyball, she did make the USA volleyball team last year.
Okay.
So what she had to do is determine whether to play for USA volleyball, where Clemson University was actually traveling abroad to Europe on a 10-day excursion. So, I'm like, the decision can't be mine, it needs to be yours. So what do you want to do? So she opted to participate and travel with her college team to go to Europe because she felt like it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. On the other hand, she was saying that she could most likely go back and try out for USA volleyball and have the potential to make the team. So it's things like that come up where the decisions need to be made. But life after volleyball, she's made some changes. So most likely she is thinking about obtaining a master's in organizational something theory. Beforehand, it was, to become a licensed nurse practitioner. So she has some options, and she's doing very well. She recently made the honor roll. So just to narrow it down to make sure what she want to do. She recently disclosed that from the medical field, she was like, Mom, I need to get past the fear of needles.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of needles in the medical field, so.
Yeah.
So my next question to you is, as a parent, how is it being a parent to a child that is going to school out of state? What is your advice for parents? What are some things that you've learned along the journey?
Well, if nothing else, like when we, dropped her off at school, you just have to trust what you have provided and instilled in your child and know that it's going to work. Yep, every child is different. But yeah, you got to trust that everything you put them in is going to turn out okay. So a lot of people ask me, like, Sonya, did you cry when you dropped her off? And I said, no, I didn't. And it's not because I didn't miss my child. It's just that I trust the things that me and her dad have instilled in her, that she'll be okay. But in my brain, I always think, like, if something would happen, I don't care where she is, I can still get there.
Yeah.
that's just the way it is. Yeah.
and just off of that, you mentioned something what happened, and we were kind of discussing this before we started going live. Is Clemson was on the news for a lot of athletes who were got the coronavirus or the COVID-19.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that, and like what's Clemson doing to deal with that situation?
Well, I will say this. So, as far as Clemson University is concerned, that we are in, when I say we, like the parents of student athletes and just students in general are in constant communication. So we receive significant updates. Any change that occur, we are informed. And then, we know that our child is being tested, and so they encourage them to share with us whether they test positive or negative. But Clemson has protocol in place. In the event that a athlete or student tests positive, that they are to be quarantined away from their residential area. We were informed that their residential area will be disinfected, right? And they'll be retested again. And they encourage everything that has always been encouraged, and that's wearing masks, the cleanliness, the gloves and things like that. But to practice social distancing is, important. No, we're not there as parents to continuously remind our child, you need to not go to that party, or, when you have these student gatherings, you need to, start distancing yourself. So just like I shared earlier, one conversation that we had with my daughter was, it was really bad at some point, here in Michigan, including having lost some family members and some friends. At one point, Solei was like, "Mom, I think I feel like I'll be safer at school." And just now it seems like COVID-19 is hitting the southern states, if I can say that, the way it was hitting like up north in the Midwest and things like that. And just so happened, she's in South Carolina and things are happening. She's been tested a couple of times and came back negative. So we'll, remain in constant prayers that she don't test positive. And then even for some of the students that did test positive, to my knowledge, their symptoms are not of extenuating circumstance. The worst I heard is like a kid had a fever, right? Some of them, are just asymptomatic but tested positive.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I know, like we mentioned, it was on the news and people read about it or at least heard about it. So thank you for addressing that. So my next question to you is, you have kids that are well respected, as people, as students, as athletes. Like you mentioned, you have a son that is 6'5", sophomore, brother Rice. I already know that he is probably balling. I don't know personally, but I could just assume. But as a parent, what are your expectations for your kids with them, being brought up or being so highly touted as athletes? Like, what is a parent's expectations or your expectations?
With me having been a student athlete, and I didn't mention this when you said, tell me something about yourself. I attended the University of Illinois on a basketball scholarship. That was a very, very long time ago. Obviously, things are different, but the traditional concepts are still the same. I always tell my children, more so my son, because I can say this, every child is different, right? But when someone says your name, what do you want them to say about you? Or what do you think they're going to say? So your character is what is attached to you. What somebody actually says about you is their opinion. But what are you presenting, right? The expectation is carry yourself in a manner that's respectable. And, academics obviously is very, very important to me. So they cannot BS under no circumstance when it comes to that. And I'm very realistic. Yep, my kids struggle here and there, but it's how bad do you want it? The work ethic has to be there in order for your success to show itself. So I wouldn't say I'm hard on them, but I don't hold any punches.
Definitely.
My husband himself, he could be a little rough around the edges, and my son might say, my dad always have his foot on my neck, but it comes from a loving place.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the best. I mean, I think that's the best way of being a parent. You have to kind of.
We're here to be their friends. That's for sure.
Exactly. So, thank you for sharing that. It's important stuff that you mentioned that. So, I mean, you played sports. Your kids play sports. I'm assuming your husband, he played sports when.
He didn't, but it's okay.
Oh, okay. Well, my question to you is, why do you feel it's important for kids to play sports or just being in activities, but more so sports, I guess?
I think essentially it creates a well-balanced life for an individual. It doesn't necessarily have to be with sports, but when you get older, you get grown and have enter into the real world where you want to be gainfully employed or even have your own business. Typically, an employer may sit down and ask you, tell me what it's like to be, they always ask about teamwork. What does that look like? Well, if you've never been on a team or never been in a leadership role, you wouldn't know what that looked like. So how do you gain those life experiences? Typically, it's through a sport or an event or some type of activity that you participate in that will give you those life experiences. Unfortunately, some people never had that opportunity, and typically the employer will pick a student athlete because of the balance and experience that they have acquired. In addition to the knowledge to perform that task or that job, they typically rise to the top. But about, overall, it's about work balance, teamwork, how do you get out of these different situations and you're not so self-absorbed that you're not thinking about your teammates or your coworkers.
Definitely, and that's some great advice right there. And that is something that a lot of employers look at is how do you work well with other people. And like you said, that teamwork aspect is very important. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So going off of that, I guess my next question is, you're a behavior academic interventionist at Hamtramck High School. What is it like to being a mentor for the students at the school?
I never looked at it as a mentor, but I love it. It gets me up every day because anyone who knows me knows that I love children. You don't have to be mine. I just like to see the change and the transition that children or our students or kids make. Where you don't have to be a bad kid. I just want to see all kids succeed regardless. You may not have the greatest life experiences, but you can shine later on. It gives me great joy if I go to the grocery store, if I go to the store and I see this kid that, either attended the school that I worked at, and for the most part, I thank God for this gift. Typically, I remember the kid's name, and they're like, "Oh my God, you remember my name!" Yeah. And then I remember something about them. But it's genuine. But it's about making sure that we don't live in the world by ourselves. And if I can say this, you don't treat people like shit just because I never know who I'm gonna come across, right? And if I treated the kid like shit, it could come back on me. So. But just in general, I love the kids. I like to see them change because who knows, those same kids that I came across could potentially be someone that can make an impact, not just in my life, not just in our community, but in our world and overall.
Yep.
Just never know.
You are right, and that is the best way of going about things. And it's so funny that you said it's a God-given gift to remember people's names because it is. Because I'm not good at it. I am not good at it. So that definitely is a gift. I can tell you that. That's for sure. So, you work in Hamtramck, and, a lot of the people that watch this are probably from Hamtramck. So what is your favorite part about working and being, basically working in Hamtramck, the city of Hamtramck?
The cultural diversity is significant. I mean, you can't get away from it. You might as well embrace it. So, I find myself, and you can, like some of the kids, if I don't know something, I don't never have a problem asking, one of the students, what does that mean? Or, tell me something about your culture. We're in an educational setting, so what better way to learn something more, to build relationships and become more engaged in our student lives. And that is one of the benefits that can actually take place, because all students want to be liked. And how do you do that? By engaging and interacting, and building those relationships. And culture has nothing to do with that. But we're there, right?
Yeah.
But again, you get something different every day, and it's easy for me to get up and go to work.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that is something, I guess that kind of leads to the next question is, what is your motivating factor? Like, what gets you up every morning?
Oh, yeah, to see the change in the kids. For some kids, life is not easy. And if they look forward to coming to school, to see an adult that is embracing them, that can motivate them, that's mentoring and that's educating them, and to help them heal, if I can say that, then that's what I'm here for.
Definitely.
Because children and youth or school-age children need an adult, someone to cheer for them and root for them. Because it's needed. Because if you're not, then how would you otherwise make it? Somebody did it for me. Somebody did it for you. And that's what the educational system is for. And cheer them on, motivate them, and to educate them. So push them on to be great, right?
Yeah, and for some people, you might be the only one that is doing that in their life, sadly. But that is, for some, that's just how it works, Some people don't have that person to push them or motivate them. So, my next question to you is, for someone that may be walking in the same or similar footsteps as you, what advice would you give them? Motivate me. And this is the
different.
But I'm sorry. What I was gonna say was you could touch on the aspect of being a parent to a D1 athlete, being a worker at the high school. You could kind of touch on all that,
Okay, so if I can say, I'll say a couple of things. And I didn't understand this when my mother said it, like when I was coming up. It's 4 of us. I don't have any brothers, but me and my sisters were, raised close. But one thing we would say, because all kids want to be like that. At some point, at least at one point, I was thinking like, this can't be life. I wasn't a bad kid, making grades. It was like, this is not fun. But as a parent, coming from a parent perspective, my mother used to always say, listen, I can't treat you all the same, right? You were born on a different day. You got different names. You look different. You're shaped up different. Everything. I can't treat you the same, but I do love you, if that makes sense. And she would always say that you may not understand now, but you'll understand later, and then more so if in fact you actually had kids. So the next thing I would say, as a parent, as a teacher, or as the adult that's important in a child's life, don't just listen with your ear, listen with your heart. Because if you're just listening with your ear, sometimes if a car comes past, we can miss something. If the volume is turned up too much, we still might miss something if we listen with our ear. But if we listen with our heart, we're inviting and bringing in a kid, good, bad, or ugly. A child doesn't have to have something wrong with them in order for that to happen. But again, listen intently and listen wholeheartedly. Because when I was coming up, sometimes, the rule was kids were seen and not heard. And then I was like, well, if I ever have a kid, I'll at least let them express themselves. Right now, our kids come with a lot of shit. They do. And sometimes they need to express themselves. And that's okay. But it needs to be done in a responsible, safe manner, if I can say that.
Yeah, definitely. talk about awesome advice right there. I really do hope people could come across this and hear the things that you had to say. Kind of just finishing off the interview and the questions. I didn't really write this down, but I got a question for you because you mentioned that your son is 6'5", 6'6" forward at Brother Rice, and he's going into his sophomore season. So does he have like a dream school in mind? I know you kind of can see that Michigan State in the background in here. You know, I'm kind of
nothing about no green and white. You know, for me, I was Illinois. That was that blue and orange. But you know, we still Big Ten. I respect that.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think more so, you know, now our kids they have the intent of building these powerhouses. Like they have a mantra of like this fab thing. It's like, you know, so they had their buddies, they had these conversations, and they was like, we can all go to the same school, you know, we can do something. So I think that's probably in the back of his mind. As far as the school is concerned, I won't say it because he's not here. I'd rather for him to, you know, to convey that. But right now I can't speak on it, but I do know they have these conversations where they want to have these, build these powerhouse programs. And what better way to do it than with a buddy that you have, you know, came up through the ranks with, you know, whether they play AAU or play high school basketball. You know, I'm sure there's a dream back there, a dream school that he wants to go to. But I think more so, I probably need to let him know and understand you might have to do this alone. Yeah. It'd be great if you could do it with a buddy, but, you know.
Eventually that's what kind of happens and you know, down the line. But, hey, that's great thinking. At least they're thinking about that team mantra and doing it together. That's a good mindset to have, especially at a young age. So I guess the final thing I want to say is any last words that you want to say out there? I mean, I know there's a lot going on in the world, the virus, the Black Lives Matter movement. So anything you want to mention?
Just like you said, well, in keeping with the Motivate Me, I think if nothing else, you may not have, as a child, you may not have a parent, but you may have as an adult. But love is a universal language that everybody can understand. So, you know, loving our children is the one thing that we can give, and do that. Once you do that, then everything else should initially fall in place. You know, the guidance, you know, about behavior, academics, sports, all those things will fall in place.
There you guys go. Those are some wise words. Thank you again, Sonya, for doing this interview. If you want to stay on, by the way, stay on. We could just chat a little bit once I just shut this down. For those of you that are watching, thank you so much. This is another interview on Motivate Me and 313. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
That.